The Spanish Civil War is seen as a defining moment in the Luftwaffe's history, revolutionizing the way it conducted an air war in the ramp-up to World War II. But today I will talk about one of the most misunderstood aspects of the Spanish Civil War. This war did not shape Luftwaffe close air support in the way I see commonly described. I am Christoph Bergs, you're watching Military Aviation History. This video is sponsored by our longtime friends, the Naval Institute Press. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Luftwaffe at War, a series supported by Patreons and channel members like Please David, Aman and Archmagus, who recently signed up. Now, Germany's involvement in the Spanish Civil War is often explained as a proving ground for new tactics and equipment. Yet the motivation to assist the nationalist cause in Spain is not that clear, and likely a combination of far different reasons, as the historian Messerschmitt explains. To this day, it is still unclear what motivated Hitler to intervene in Spain. It is likely that several motives were at play simultaneously. Neither a predominantly defense economic interest nor strategic intentions against the West can be considered the sole decisive factor." End quote. Now, Hitler's approach was not uncontested domestically. He went against his own foreign ministry and even part of the armed forces. The Kriegsmarine, the German Navy, was critical of any involvement, to say the least, and even Göring and the Luftwaffe were not fully convinced at first. Of course, as part of German involvement, the Germans dispatched the so-called Condor Legion, an expeditionary formation. The air component of the Legion included various outdated aircraft like the Heinkel HE-51 fighter. Later it included more modern machines like the Junkers Ju-87 Stuka, the Heinkel 112 and the Messerschmitt Bf-109. The Condor Legion was fairly modest in size, about 5,000 people at a time coming in through rotation cycles. Noteworthy is that German assistance to the nationalists was of several orders of magnitude smaller than Italy's assistance to Franco. Given the number of stories rung around the Condor Legion, it is ironic that it continues to be one of the most enigmatic formations. Few historians have written truly deep research on it, likely because many important files have been destroyed over the course of World War II. To this day, we are ignorant of many basic data points on the Condor Legion. Open quote, "It is not known how many German soldiers fought in Spain. This is partly due to the precarious state of the records. In general, the figure of 19,000 has been agreed upon in the literature today, but this is no more than a rough estimate based on multiplying the number of rotations by the approximate number of personnel." End quote. This is a constant challenge for historians like me that specialize in the Luftwaffe. It's important to remember that the majority of Luftwaffe sources were destroyed towards the end of the war, and we have far less certainty on many aspects of the Luftwaffe's history than a lot of YouTube, TV and internet content would make us believe. As stated in the introduction, Germany did not assist the nationalists in 1936 just to test some new fancy and less fancy kit. That was merely one of the results of its involvement. Open quote, "It is frequently charged that the Spanish War was a testing ground for the Luftwaffe. Indeed, it became so by chance. It would have been a dereliction of responsibility by not immediately sending every weapon system coming available to the men who had been committed to the battle with antiquated and inferior equipment." End quote. To suggest that Germany entered the Spanish Civil War just to test new shiny stuff thus confuses cause with effect. Previous episodes in the Luftwaffe at War series already explained the limited interest the Luftwaffe had in close air support before World War II. In Spain, attacks against ground targets were unpopular among Luftwaffe fighter pilots. These missions did not correspond to the preferred self-perception of fighter pilots that wanted to shoot down planes, not hunt for trucks or machine gun positions. As Schueler-Springorum tells us, only gradually did the low-level attacks, which were flown either during dedicated sorties or as free hunts in the frontline area, gain some acceptance. End quote. For example, in March 1937, German fighter bombers were called in on pre-planned strikes to destroy frontline positions to allow nationalist infantry to advance. Open quote. German aircraft struck 50 meters in front of the nationalist infantry. At 9:50 in the morning, the squadrons of Heinkel 51s bombed and strafed the enemy front positions and were immediately followed by the Heinkel 70s and Spanish flights with 50-kilogram bombs." End quote. As a result, the Luftwaffe got a taste of what persistent air attacks could do. Open quote. One tactic employed by the Luftwaffe in Spain that was found to be very successful was the tactic of shuttle attacks, sending one flight at a time to drop bombs on enemy positions and then returning to base to rearm, refuel, while the next flight in the squadron took over the attack. End quote. This wasn't close air support as we think of today. Radios were still in their infancy. Air attacks were typically pre-planned strikes in proximity of the front line, timed to arrive just before an infantry assault. Think of it as a replacement for artillery barrages. And in fact, that was exactly the idea, since National Spain lacked sufficient artillery. As Corum tells us, open quote, "In addition to the use of aircraft in a close support role, approximately half of the Condor Legion's flak force was brought up to the front lines, and the 88mm flak guns were used as direct fire artillery." End quote. This for now rudimentary cooperation between air and land left a lasting impression on some individuals. One of them was General Wolfram von Richthofen. Richthofen was a critic of using aircraft to attack frontline targets, but the Spanish Civil War softened his views. More important, however, was the growing understanding of what air-ground cooperation entails in practice. The Luftwaffe had to work hard to overcome the problems of coordinating an air-ground offensive. Each operation had to be carefully planned, with German airmen coordinating with the national staff at the top level. The coordination of the air and ground forces improved markedly during the course of the campaign. Close support was only a small externality of this coordination. Instead, the majority of the work was ensuring that the Condor Legion aligned with the nationalist ground maneuver and fire plan. Thus, aircraft would strike Republican targets at various ranges from the front to ease the advance of ground forces. A major learning was the experience on how to coordinate air-ground operations. This is far more significant than conducting a few strikes on the front lines. Now, the Condor Legion sent 2 reports a week to Berlin. There, a Luftwaffe working group was to analyze the conflict and generate some conclusions. It published a preliminary report in early 1940, far too late to have any direct results. And this working group was subsequently disbanded. In his autobiography, the later General der Flieger Adolf Galland stated with a certain sarcasm that reports by the Condor Legion were steam-pressed and registered by bureaucrats that then locked them away in safes. Of course, at this point, I'm immediately reminded of the Indiana Jones scene where top men are set to study the Lost Ark after Indy saved it from the Nazis. Anyway, that does not mean that the Spanish Civil War did not have an influence on the Luftwaffe, but it was not prescriptive and binary. It was nuanced and individual. Even at the time, the Germans wondered how relevant the Spanish Civil War was for a future war. And they weren't the only ones. The same applied to Britain and the US. And taking the US, a new book called US Mercenaries and the Condor Legions by Christopher Marquis just dropped with our friends at the Naval Institute Press. This book looks at the work of American military attachés that documented the Civil War and how these reports were then processed in the US. It is a book that I am looking forward to myself, and you can get it at a steep discount by using the seasonal code HOLIDAY in December 2025 or my standard code MILAVHIS all year round. If you are an avid reader, check out the Naval Institute Press's membership offer. With many perks and an exclusive discount, membership can quickly pay for itself. The Institute has partnered with me for many years. I'm very proud of this relationship and always hear good feedback. So check out the description below to get your discount. In terms of German learnings, Schueler-Springorum notes that the following aspects in particular were observed, studied, described, discussed and passed on. The close air-ground coordination perfected by the so-called Schlachtflieger and carried out in the notorious Schwerpunkt attacks, in which all available troops, pilots and anti-aircraft gunners, artillery and tanks, and finally the infantry were deployed en masse to break through a section of the front. This corresponds to the popular image of the Wehrmacht from World War II. But notice that the quote does not state that anything was adopted, rather that it was observed, discussed, processed. Sure enough, elements mirror the fighting of World War II, but we should not assume causality which I see as the main danger with the Spanish Civil War's reputation on the Germans. After years of clandestine planning, German doctrine, maneuver exercises and capability planning were well advanced by 1937. For example, the Luftwaffe's doctrine called for coordination with the army during decisive operations since the first publication in 1935, a year before the Spanish Civil War started. As my own publications demonstrate, Germany had no established coordinating command and control function for close air support until the end of 1942. Sure enough, in 1939 to 1940, the German Luftwaffe and army cooperated, coordinated and communicated more than allied nations like France and Britain. Yet the Luftwaffe did not conduct close air support at large and was against close air support as a concept except as part of pre-planned timed airstrikes or in emergencies. We see this clearly in operations in Poland and France. Only from 1942 onwards do we see a fundamental different approach which includes dynamic frontline tasking at the force level. Likewise, when Germany invaded Poland, the Luftwaffe had only 40, that's 40, close air support Henschel 123 aircraft. That's 1% of the Luftwaffe. I have described this in detail in a different episode. Due to Spain, a new close air support aircraft, later Henschel 129, was proposed, but it did not become an immediate priority. So were there any important outcomes for Luftwaffe close air support? Yes, and I would say there were broadly 3 of them. But rather than being centered squarely on close air support, these learnings are about air-ground cooperation, operational planning, staff work, and coordination. Now, first off, on the tactical level, of course, the Spanish Civil War gave a first taste of what operating under combat conditions was like at the time. This gave data points on technology and tactics, while legionnaires gained tangible combat experience. And this experience was taken back to Germany. It is questionable how institutionalized these learnings are, but we do know that they were dispersed into various units, influencing their tactical proficiency. For example, later flying aces like Mulders cut their teeth in Spain, then became instructors at home and used the experience to coach other pilots. In how far this is transferable to close air support, considering a baseline of only 40 aircraft in the Luftwaffe, can be questioned. At the very least, however, the fighter bomber was now a proven concept. More important in my mind is the exposure of individuals like General Hugo Sperle, who initially commanded the Condor Legion, and Wolfram von Lichthofen, of course. This generated operational and staff-level experience. As Corum tells us, Spain instilled a handful of commanders with an understanding of the importance of generating sorties and what sort of support staff work is required for all of this. By the end of the Spanish War, many senior Luftwaffe officers, including Generals Sperle, von Richthofen, and future Generals Drum, Plocher, and Seidemann, had all gained recent command experience. The staff of the Condor Legion had gained experience at planning and conducting combat operations in a difficult environment." End quote. There was no high-level directive to change the Luftwaffe following the Civil War, yet it would benefit. In 1939 von Richthofens formation, the Fliegerführer zur besonderen Verwendung, later known as Fliegerkorps 8, supported the armored advance of Army Group South. Back then, it was the only formation capable of conducting dedicated air-ground cooperation. By the time the Luftwaffe fundamentally revises its structures and operational procedures for close air support in 1942-1943, the World War II experience weighed far more heavily on these changes than the by now almost forgotten Spanish Civil War. Another important point is that combat operations infused an understanding of what it takes to operate at a high tempo, especially in terms of sustainment and logistics. Initially, the Condor Legion had a rude awakening. Open quote, "It was recognized that the Condor Legion had not only underestimated the combat deficiencies of their battle forces, but also the maintenance, replace parts, and facilities that would be required to maintain a respectable number of their aircraft suitable for flying. The rapidly shifting battlefronts placed a great strain on the Legion's transportation." End quote. Nowadays, German logistics is considered a weak point, but it is noteworthy that it received a lot of emphasis. And some of this may have come from that Spanish Civil War experience. From 1939, due to a dedicated motor and aircraft pool for transportation support, as well as mobile maintenance companies, German squadrons outsorted Allied units in the early campaigns. This did lead to frequent bottlenecks in fuels and munitions, but these were, at the time, the result of the Luftwaffe's ability to generate sorties rather than a lacking logistic support. That would only come later. I would be highly interested in conducting further research on this, by the way, as the Spanish Civil War may have indeed had a significant impact on German operational and sustainment planning, which then of course would also have benefited operational turnaround for close air support missions. So, to sum up, the Spanish Civil War did not shift the Luftwaffe to close air support, but it provided experience in operational level air-ground cooperation that was exploited in Germany's initial campaigns. As always, I encourage you to peruse the sources of this video. These provide a nuanced analysis on the Luftwaffe in the Spanish Civil War. Also remember to check in with the Naval Institute Press to benefit from a discount code on excellent books. Join me next time on The Luftwaffe at War as we dive deeper into the Luftwaffe's operations, aircraft and thinking during World War II. The show is written and produced by me, Christoph Bergs, and if you want to get a hold of future episodes early, vote on topics and get priority access to Q&As, become a supporter of The Luftwaffe at War at patreon.com/milAvHistory or via YouTube memberships on military aviation history. A big thank you goes to all the supporters for making this possible. As always, thank you for joining me today and have a great day and see you in the sky.